What's going on, everybody? We're back. It's the Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 30. A little bit of a milestone on this Thursday, October 26th, 2023. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy, James D. Jackson, Tom Green will be along in just a little bit on this OU Kansas week. CK, how you feeling, man? Already the last football weekend of October, if you can believe it. The next time we're doing this, it'll be November and the home stretch of the season. It's just slipping through our fingers, man. It gone before you knew it.
I don't love it, but I do enjoy it. Right, we are in one of the best times of the year. Obviously,
Sure.
we got the World Series coming up. I got that thing on. I got for our podcast audience, the Rangers hoodie is out and about today here in Louisville, Texas. Looking forward to the World Series starting up on Friday. You have the NBA start up. Obviously, I know you were glued into the Thunder game, Josh. So I'm curious if our audience was as dialed in as you were.
Fantastic opener. I'm convinced they're going to go 82-0.
There we go. So the dynasty begins this year, according to Josh. You obviously got that going on. You've got National Hockey League action. I obviously, with my move up to Nashville, became a big Predators fan. So I've been dialed in. And then, of course, NFL and college football. So I'm excited for this weekend, honestly. Like you mentioned it's going by fast. World Series starting up on Friday. This OU Kansas game that we're going to get into here on the show is really an exciting one to start it off at 11 a.m. Sellout crowd, big noon kickoff. So that's going to be really cool on Saturday. And Sunday, head to the Cowboys game. They're playing the Rams. So looking forward to it. But
man, we got a lot going on.
Let's get into this thing, man. It's going to be a busy show, like a busy weekend.
Oh, yeah. Busy times, great time. October, November are just the GOAT sports months, and we're rolling right through. Huge game for Oklahoma this weekend. When we talked on the bye week, you and I, we kind of speculated, like, what's the toughest game left? This was kind of the one that stood out. Now, is it going to be Jalen Daniels? They announced just right before we started recording, there was reports, Pete Thamel, ESPN, and a couple others that said it will be Jason Bean this weekend, which was expected. But Bean is like one of the better backups probably in the country. Played Oklahoma well last year. So we'll get into the weeds of that shortly. Going to be a fun game this weekend. But as you guys know, Thursday shows are game preview shows. They're also recruiting shows. We have our recruiting analyst here, Collin, who knows everything there is to know about OU recruiting. So we'll get a few updates on a few things before we get into that Kansas game. Let's start off with Devon Jordan. Committed last Friday, the Union, Tulsa Union cornerback. It's a guy that I actually have had the pleasure of seeing in person. I saw him earlier this year against Westmore, going against another OU commit in the secondary, Michael Patterson-McDonald. Solid length, athleticism, obviously comes from a great program in Tulsa Union. Most Oklahoma fans are very aware of what that school has done for a very long time in the Oklahoma high school ranks. He's a composite 4-star, number 4 player in Oklahoma, 5'11", 168 is what he's listed at in our database. Collin, I guess just talk about your eval of the player and what you've heard in terms of, how much Oklahoma likes him, how quick he can fit in. Just kind of paint a picture for everybody as Oklahoma makes another in-state get from a big program with Devon Jordan coming aboard from Tulsa Union.
You got to love what Brent Venables and this staff have accomplished in-state, right? I mean, they are really making it a priority. And you always do. I don't want to sit here and act like, for example, the Riley tenure ignored in-state talent, but it feels like now more than over the past few years, Brent Venables and this staff have really dialed into the OK prep scene and trying to get the top players at whatever cost. I mean, we've seen cycle alone, Andy Bass being a quote-unquote preferred walk-on take because he's one of the state's most dynamic overall athletes. But they funded his scholarship through NIL because they want those dynamic playmakers inside the state of Oklahoma on OU's roster. They really are excited about the momentum that they've generated. And I think with Devon Jordan, this is one that, of all the dominoes that have fallen in the state of Oklahoma for OU to this point, this feels like a pretty big one. Now, as far as the player, just real quick, 5'11", 6-foot-ish. Wouldn't be surprised if he grows an inch higher in height at the collegiate level. I believe he's 170-ish right now, so he's going to have to add weight. I think that's the biggest thing that when you see Devon Jordan, you know it's going to have to develop frame-wise in order for him to fully translate to the next level. But where he is not necessarily completely advanced from a frame perspective, I do think you really have to like where he's at as a player. Playing at Tulsa Union, you're going to be asked to do a lot more as a player than maybe some other spots in the high school scene, right? Because of that program, how developed it is, how well run it is. His cornerbacks coach played college football at TCU, so he's getting firsthand experience from a guy who's gone out and done it. And the bottom line here, too, is Devon Jordan just flat out. He has those instincts, that natural ability. Yeah. And I think, too, why you really like getting this guy, that kind of in-between frame and ability, it feels like Devon Jordan is someone who could play corner, could play some safety for you, too, which we know that Oklahoma really wants versatility along the offensive line, and they want versatility at that safety spot. So if you get a guy who can kind of play that like Kendall Dolby role for you, for example, who can play some corner, play some cheetah nickel, maybe play some safety, you got to like what you're getting, especially inside of the state of Oklahoma. And Devon Jordan's case, too, going from the player to the recruitment. I know that there was kind of a belief from sources who I had talked to for a little while that Devon Jordan, for a while, wasn't likely going to end up at OU's class. There was some ebbs and flows to this recruitment. You have some serious contenders: Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas A&M, Alabama. That's some names to know in this region. And for a player like Devon Jordan, I know he was giving all of those schools a very serious look. Lots of different sort of twists and turns that went on behind the scenes here. OU just stayed right in there. They kept hovering. They said, if you want to come here, you can come here. If you don't need to, we're very pleased with what we've accomplished defensive back-wise in this cycle. And now I think Devon Jordan, as things went on, time went on, he realized he wanted to stay inside the state. He wanted to stay at home, have that ability to play at a place like OU. He's very close with Jay Vlai, who is, as we know, a hell of a recruiter. And he gets to go play inside his home state in the SEC. So all things accounted for, really quality overall get, a solid move for Devon Jordan. In the end, I think everyone's pretty happy about it.
100%. You know, like I said, James and I both were at that Union Westmore game in late August. This is, a couple months ago now, but we talked to him a little bit after the game, and he mentioned Oklahoma was the way he worded it was his top school at that time. And that was 2 months ago. Recruiting changes a lot, but it shows you that he was kind of gearing toward this. This was kind of his preference, and it's the way it worked out. Obviously, Oklahoma will have a former teammate of his, I guess, backing up a couple of years to Jaden Rowe, is on the team now. A Union defensive back is injured right now, but certainly somebody that seems to factor into the future plan. So could be a couple of Union Red Hawks. So got to used to that name change of a couple of years ago in the secondary here coming up before too long. Not a bad program to have a good relationship with, too. Just in general, you're taking kids. That's not ever going to be a bad thing to help you out down the road, too, for Oklahoma. Sticking in the secondary, we've talked about him a little bit before. Reggie Powers, the kid, if you're unfamiliar, if you don't remember quite, like, who was that? Michigan State decommit. Oklahoma then seemed to be right in the mix of it. We talked about this a few weeks ago. From Dayton, Ohio. He's a 4-star safety, very talented player. You put a crystal ball in this week for the Sooners. What made you feel good about it? And if Powers comes aboard, what does that mean for Oklahoma?
Yeah, this is a fascinating one to follow, right? Because of the Michigan State decommitment, Powers went back onto the scene, and you just felt like, especially with the supply and demand right now for 4-star caliber guys at that secondary spot, kind of that versatile hybrid safety role, there are going to be a lot of folks calling Reggie Powers, and deservedly so. I know in our most recent 2024 rankings update at 24/7 Sports, I think Powers jumped like 100 spots or something. I don't know off the top of my head, but the guy is a really darn good football player.
154 overall.
If you're look, rule of thumb, if you go from outside the top 247 inside the top 200 at 154, so you're inside the top like 160, 175, you're a pretty damn good football player. You know what I mean? So, and I know the other part of this too is, and for some context, one of our board members tried to get after me because I said something like Powers is really good ability paired with natural size. And they were like, oh, 6'1", 200 pounds is size these days. And I was like, ladies and gentlemen, in the NFL, the average height for a safety is 6'125". and around 203 pounds. Reggie Powers is 6'1", 200 as a senior in high school. So, let's go ahead and address this. Reggie Powers is not only pretty advanced of a player in the high school ranks, he's advanced frame-wise. And I think you look at him, the big thing that we have to kind of update here, right, is Michael Boganowski makes that commitment. There's that temporary pause. You're like, okay, what does this mean for Powers? Well, he's more than a take, and I think OU showed him that over the weekend. He made it out to Norman for the UCF game, but of note here, Josh, as you know, it was not the official visit capacity of a trip that it was expected originally. He was supposed to take an OV. He ended up making it an unofficial visit, but even with it being an unofficial, he stayed until Monday morning and spent further quality time with OU's coaching staff. Left that Monday morning with the understanding on top of that he was going to take an official visit still in Norman, probably sometime later this season. I would guess right now he ends up taking that OV for the West Virginia game at home. So you're really liking, if you're Oklahoma staff, where things stand coming out of that weekend. He stays multiple days in an unofficial visit capacity. You're feeling like the leader. He leaves that Monday morning and he's saying, all right, I want to come back anyway. And even on top of that, too, just kind of some rumblings working with Alan True, national recruiting analyst and Midwest expert for us in the network, and then Steve Wiltfong, obviously director of recruiting. Kind of get the sense, Josh, that even before that official visit, where there was kind of an understanding out of the weekend that might be the time frame where Powers wanted to wind things down, he might shut it down earlier, which is certainly something to follow. I think over the next 3 to 4 to 7 days, you're kind of on decision alert here for Reggie Powers. And if he makes the final call, I think it's advantage Oklahoma. So be alert here, OU fans. Powers, yes, he's still taking that OV. He came off of a very extensive unofficial, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just decides to wrap things up. And the way things have gone in OU's favor, this is someone who they're trying to land as a nickel backer cheetah type who could also potentially play the high safety and some base cover 3 looks. They really like his talent, ability, and size, and he's the perfect fit for Brent Venables' defense. And I think in the end, it could help to some positive momentum here.
Turn your tweet notifications on, basically, is what Collin saying for Reggie Powers. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the size, too, he's essentially the same size as Key Lawrence is now. And obviously, Key Lawrence has played a few years of college football. So, yeah, seems like a great get if Oklahoma does, in fact, land him. Obviously, took a little bit of, I don't know if luck is the right way to put it with the situation at Michigan State, but with what transpired there, he decommitted. You got a second crack at him, basically, and sounds like Oklahoma is capitalizing. We'll see what happens whenever he does make that decision. But those who have been VIP subscribers and have kept up with the podcast and whatever else know, when Collin puts in a crystal ball, Oklahoma's batting a pretty high percentage. So hopefully we'll get that here before too long. A couple other updates before we get into the Kansas game. We talked last week about Grant Bricks, Eddie Pier Louie, a couple of offensive linemen in 2024. I recommend people, if they missed last Thursday's show, to go get kind of the full breakdown. But since then, Collin, Eddie Pier Louie talked about it, that he might make it for UCF. He didn't. And Grant Bricks has had the Brinks truck backed up for him from Nebraska, almost literally. They had a huge, if you didn't see it on I don't remember what day it was, earlier this week, Nebraska had literally a semi-truck type thing parked. Was that in front of his high school?
Yep, in front of the high school field.
So they're doing whatever they can for this kid. Just, I guess, you don't have to get crazy in depth, but just a little temperature check on both EPL and Bricks a week later. Obviously, when we talked last Thursday, it seemed like there was a chance for some decisions soon. Obviously, a week later, we haven't got any. So what are you kind of feeling like things are at right now with those two guys?
Yeah, we were talking about this before the show, right? But because of where OU is in the 2024 cycle, you're at 27 commits. You kind of have to address anything that's going on with the 3 to 4 remaining targets in the cycle who are uncommitted. And leading off with Eddie Pier Louie, as you mentioned, they were trying to get him in town for the UCF game. Didn't end up working out. probably would have been beneficial, right? Especially because UCF's a primary contender in this recruitment. And out of that, obviously, that was good news for UCF, for Miami, a couple other programs in the mix. I think the biggest thing to know here is he is trying to get back to Norman. He still wants to take in his first game. Unfortunately, didn't make it for that UCF game, but it sounds like West Virginia could be that game again where he tries to make the visit. However, since that time where he was unable to make it to Norman, sounds like UCF and Miami, there's growing optimism. There are, as I've noted on our board a couple times, like I've been indicated by a couple different sources that some people in Pier Louie's camp are sending out some reassurances of sorts to various programs, basically saying like, hey, we're not decided, done deal. We still want to explore the process, but Oklahoma still feels pretty good. So something to follow there. And then on Grant Brix, yeah, like it felt behind the scenes again. I don't even know how many times we're at now, Josh, but it felt like again, Grant Brix was gearing up to make a decision. But the weekend comes and goes. Nebraska pulls up the equipment semi-truck with all the branding, I believe, right outside of his high school field. So a little bit of a clever tactic. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who thought of that in the recruiting department, but they probably got a nice little raise or a Christmas bonus coming their way. The big thing here, though, is Oklahoma, I would say, more so than Eddie Pier Louie even, is still feeling pretty confident about where they stand with Grant Brix. And I wouldn't be surprised if a particular OU staffer, who obviously as the team heads up north to Kansas, perhaps appears in Iowa over the weekend as well. So something to track. But yeah, I'm not as concerned for Oklahoma with their standing with Grant Brix today as I am with maybe how things are opening up for Eddie Pier Louie and his recruitment. So 2 offensive linemen obviously still remaining on the board. A little bit of different tells of the tape, but Oklahoma continues to feel very positively about it standing with both. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
100%. Yeah, we'll keep a close eye on both of them. I think Brix is making a run for the guy we've maybe talked about the most on this show. Because like you said, it's been a few times where it seemed like it's getting there. Then it's like, okay, maybe not. He's going to wait a little longer. But coming up soon, you got to imagine, obviously, here as the season kind of starts to wind down, like we said, in November. On that end. Yeah, for sure. I think OU fans hope so too. Oklahoma, Kansas weekend. Get your thoughts on this game before we let you go. This is an interesting one. OU's a 9-point favorite in Lawrence. It's a sold-out crowd at David Booth Memorial Stadium. Weather looks gross. We talked about that before we came on the air. It's supposed to be like in the low 40s, maybe going to rain. I mean, it's not going to be a pretty day by any means in Lawrence, Kansas. It's not going to be Jalen Daniels. It is going to be Jason Bean, who is a very quality backup, a guy who gave OU some problems just last year. Now it's a totally different OU team, but still is a guy who can make plays. OU fans have seen him. They know that he is capable. Kansas got a good offense, not really so much on defense. What are your thoughts on this game? How worried should OU fans be with this matchup? How do you kind of see it going down?
Yeah, I think the big thing here to note is this Kansas team is not the Kansas of old, as we know. But
sure,
even beyond that, like you can state the obvious, but then you also kind of have to touch on the fact that this Kansas team is, in my opinion, well into the top half of the Big 12. I mean, if you wanted to present me the argument that they're a top 4 or 5 team in the conference, I definitely hear you out. It felt like even before the season started, this was one of the games you circled on the schedule and said, that's slip-up territory. And I guess with weather, that's literally potentially the case. Yeah. And I think that honestly favors KU, right? First of all, you and I have been to Lawrence together to cover an OU Kansas game a couple of times. I think you can back me up here when I say there are times where it's pretty sleepy out there at 11 a.m. in Lawrence, Kansas.
That's what he's used to. Yeah.
The fog, there's sometimes bad weather. It's just not the most exciting, but you gotta wake up, you gotta get going. But there is a sellout crowd expected, big noon kickoff. Like it does seem like now maybe more than ever, even when they just open the gates and let fans in for free at like halftime or whatever. This atmosphere could be electric. And Jason Bean, very, very quality backup. I've been covering him since his days in North Texas. He played Texas high school football as well. So he is someone who's going to keep you on your toes. I think that's the best way to put it. And you mentioned the Kansas defense, especially if there's weather. Yeah, they're kind of like statistically in roughly the 70s to 90s across the board, but they have playmakers. And I would say that arguably they've maybe exceeded expectations at times over the course of the year. And if they have that home field advantage, maybe some weather advantage, they're not having to be too concerned about maybe Oklahoma stretching the field vertically. That helps, especially because some of those defensive backs like to step up and make plays. So I think what I'm looking for, number one, obviously, is the run game. But I think the big thing here, especially because you kind of saw it last time around, they mentioned eye discipline, things of that nature. It's a very similar offense, maybe. And Andy Koltnecki, who, if you're not familiar, Kansas offensive coordinator, is one of my favorites in the game right now. He's a genius, and he will dial that mess up. And so if he's coming to play, which I assume he's got some goods in the goodie bag for the play calling perspective. If Kansas defensively, I think the big thing here does not have to worry about Oklahoma's vertical passing game, because not only there's weather, but I think the big thing we kind of stepped away from that UCF game, Josh, and said was, they have dudes, and Nick Anderson is that guy, but they did at times really miss Andrell Anthony's presence and the role he plays. And if that's further taken away from Oklahoma offensively, then this could get into a little bit of a rock fight, which I think is exactly what KU would welcome. And so we'll see. But I do think that Oklahoma comes out on top in the end. I'm not overly concerned. I would be a lot more concerned if Jalen Daniels were playing this game. But as we know, Jason Bean has given OU fits at times over the past few years. And so I'm expecting actually a really fun atmosphere and a pretty quality game.
Score prediction. How do you feel like it goes down? Like I said, OU's 9-point favorites at the stands right now on Thursday. I think the over-under, I had it and I clicked away from it. I think it was like 60-something, 65, I think, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, 65. So they're expecting points. Vegas is expecting some points.
Sure.
Could play a factor in that. I don't know. What do you think? How do you think this thing actually plays out?
I'm going to call it at 35-21. I'm going to say both offenses are obviously trying to dial it up, especially with the weather. I don't see a ton of field goals being too easy in this scenario. Zach Schmidt, as we know, weather aside,
he's having struggles on 75-degree sunny days right now. So.
Yeah, which is a storyline to follow, right? If this is a close game and there's weather, I would be sweating even in colder conditions if I were an OU fan. But I do think that Jeff Lebby will capitalize on some looks from this defense. I think it's a cover. You mentioned 9 points, 10 points. I think that's roughly the territory, but I go 35-21 because I don't know that I see a ton of field goals being made for either team at this time. So I favor Oklahoma, but if you told me this game ends up being very close again, can't say I'd be very surprised.
For sure. It's gotten weird in Lawrence before. The last kind of few times Oklahoma's been there, it's been a little odd. You go back to the Jalen Hurts game in 2019, which was weather delayed, and then it was weirdly competitive for a long time. Obviously, going back to Baker crotch grab game. I mean, obviously 2 years ago, we all know the circus of that game. I mean, it's kind of gotten weird in Lawrence almost every time OU goes there in the last decade or so. So probably one last time, probably no reason to expect any different. Going to be fun. Weather doesn't look great, but we'll grin and bear it, and we'll have a good weekend in Lawrence anyway. Collin, appreciate you, sir. We'll see you next Thursday to hit the latest news on the recruiting side, and we'll get ready for Bedlam, the last Bedlam for who knows how long. It's going to be a fun week next week. Look forward to that.
I will see y'all next week. Safe travels up if you're going to the game, and go Rangers, baby. Time to get 4 wins. That's all I ask.
You could either be in a great mood or very somber next Thursday. We'll see.
there is a chance that I am a DNP come next Thursday. So we'll see.
We'll see how things stand. All right, that's it for CK. We'll get James and Tom in here now to continue to break down and preview Oklahoma and Kansas coming up on Saturday in Lawrence. All right, we now welcome in Tom Green, James D. Jackson. James, it was your birthday yesterday. Happy birthday.
Happy belated. Are we going to sing happy birthday to him?
Don't do that. Don't do that. Nobody wants to hear that.
Bring out like a mariachi and a little cupcake with a candle.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right back to it.
Had some good food yesterday. Got to hang out with the wife, hang out with the family. So good times. Getting closer to 30, getting to that point to where you got to start worrying about it. But other than that, we're all set.
Hey.
Yeah, Tom's the old guy.
I was old, man.
Tom's the old guy. But yeah, happy birthday, man. Hopefully it was a good one. And right back to it, obviously, coming up with the Kansas game this weekend. Going to be fun, trip, I guess. The weather scares me. Talked about that with Collin a little bit before in the previous segment. It's looking pretty gross up there in Kansas, but it'll be cool. Another Big 12 road trip for the three of us. And should be a fun game this weekend. So we're going to break it down a little bit. Guys, just in general, this game, I guess, put OU on upset alert. 1 to 10 to start. How treacherous is this game for Oklahoma? Obviously, we'll get into all the weeds of it, what concerns us, what we think is going to help Oklahoma. We'll pick the game at the end. But just kind of on the surface level going in, where are you at in terms of this is a danger zone game for the Sooners? What do you kind of feel on that front?
I think relative to the rest of their schedule, this is probably the second toughest remaining game on the schedule right now. That Oklahoma State game just looks, as we get closer to it, it looks like it's going to be tougher and tougher the way the Cowboys are playing right now. But Kansas, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, but Kansas is going to be without Jalen Daniels, it seems. Multiple reports, this morning that Jason Bean is going to be making his fourth consecutive start, his fifth of the season. I think Jason Bean is obviously a capable quarterback who's put up some good numbers for the Jayhawks this season, and a guy that Oklahoma's seen a couple times the last 2 years. But I think without Jalen Daniels, Kansas is going to have a lot tougher time trying to pull an upset against this Oklahoma team.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that's too crazy that would give me, fear coming into this game for OU. I think not having Daniels out there for Kansas takes a big toll off of what this game could be. I think that's how it was even marketed, is this two great quarterbacks going at it. Not that Bean isn't a great quarterback. He's a very capable starter, but he's not Daniels in all respect. So, just looking at that changes a lot. And this Oklahoma defense has been so good that I just don't see a lot that Kansas can do. Now, Oklahoma's continuously scored, points in this game. I think the stat was like 34 points and so many games that they've continued to put together. That's the longest against any team for OU. They're really good against Kansas. So
yeah, interesting.
Things like that happen. So, I'm not too worried. If OU comes out and gets started early like they're supposed to, I think everything will be just fine.
Yeah. I think the weather could complicate this a little bit for Oklahoma, especially if it's rainy and, they can't throw the ball as effectively as they can, and they need to, lean more on that run game. Then things can get a little hairy. But as it stands, I just think, look, Kansas, I know they're kind of on the rise right now. Lance Leipold's done a really good job with that program. But Oklahoma hasn't lost to them since 1997.
Yeah, been a long time.
And by the way, that stat I was just mentioning, I want to say it so everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. The Sooners have scored at least 34 points in each of their last 14 games against Kansas, which is the record.
Yeah, wow.
So that's from OU Athletics. Their stat keeping people. So pretty good stat there.
Yeah.
So Oklahoma scores points in bunches against Kansas. Hasn't lost to Kansas in 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas without a starting quarterback. I just think it's going to be very difficult for Kansas to pull an upset against this Oklahoma right now with the way that they've been playing.
Now, to their credit, it's a lot better Kansas team than what they've done on the field the last couple of years. So you do have that type of respect for them. That's why I say Oklahoma comes out early, gets on them early, it'll be fine. If they don't, then that's where the scare can come in. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's a reason that the spread in this game, right as it stands right now, it's just 9 points. Like this isn't. A lot of people aren't expecting this to be a blowout. I'm sure the weather's going to play some role in that, but this is a quality Kansas team, especially from where the program was for much of the last decade, 2 decades almost.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do. I feel like there is some potential. Because like James said, I mean, Jason Bean is a solid quarterback. He's not Jalen Daniels. Jalen Daniels was the preseason All Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. That's a high bar to live up to, but he is one of the better backups, really, maybe in college football.
Yeah,
and, we've seen him be capable. Like Tom referenced earlier, we saw him last year in Norman put up a nice stat line. Kansas scored over 40 points in that game. Now, totally different OU team. Obviously, we've talked about that all season. This defense is in a totally different place than it was last year, but still something to be said for this guy's had success. So he's going to feel okay about it going in. And obviously, Oklahoma, normally when they go to Kansas, touch on this just real briefly with Collin, it's an empty stadium, probably more OU fans there than Kansas fans. Nobody cares. It's not going to be like that. It's
not the case this time.
Weekend. Like you guys said, big noon kickoff. This is OU's last time going to Lawrence, probably ever. Why would they ever go again, after this year? So they're going to get Kansas' best shot in every possible way. And like Tom referenced also, the weather does add an extra wrinkle because Oklahoma hasn't ran the ball that consistently. And theoretically, if it's 40 degrees and raining, which the rain may hold off, we'll have to see. I mean, weather's weather. It's hard to predict, but it's going to be cold. And so if it holds off, if it's raining during the game and they have to lean on the run game a little more, that's a little scary for Oklahoma. And it kind of plays more into Kansas' hands because their run offense is more their strength on the other side. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to see. Let's look at offense first for Oklahoma. Going right off that with the weather. Like we said, Kansas defense is not great. 93rd in rushing, 76th in passing, 81st in scoring. So they're average to below average across the board when it comes to defensive metrics. They're an offensive team. On paper, this seems to be a spot where Oklahoma should be able to put up a nice point total. Dylan Gabriel should have a nice day. They should be able to run the ball, all that. But the weather does complicate things. What are you guys looking at for Oklahoma offensively that they need to do, or what your concerns may be? Whatever angle you're looking at it for Oklahoma offensively in this game, because again, on paper they should be okay, but teams aren't playing on paper. And Oklahoma's had some weird games this year offensively. Just last weekend, we saw them have a weird game offensively. How do you feel like things are going to shake out, going into this weekend? Yeah,
I think for me, it starts with being able to build something off of that fourth quarter in terms of the run game. Whether that's, Gavin Sawchuk kind of coming into his own, getting a little bit more comfortable coming out of the backfield there after, he was hindered by that hamstring injury for, most of the summer and, the first half of the season, really. He showed you a couple things there in that fourth quarter, especially that 30-yard touchdown run that, was really the deciding score against UCF. And plus they get Tawee Walker back after that one-game suspension. Brent Venables confirmed that, they expect to have him back this week. How does that kind of work as a 1-2 punch right now? Where does Marcus Major fit into that scenario? How much are we going to see Dylan Gabriel run this week? But I think with, this is the second week in a row that they're playing a below average run defense. Like you said, Kansas is, 90-something against the run, allowing 161 yards per game, 4.7 yards per carry on the season. Oklahoma's going to need to do something to continue to build on that run game that we saw in the fourth quarter against UCF, especially if the weather is going to be a factor in this game.
I mean, yeah, and having Walker back is big. It's big because not only you have him as a great running back that can be back in the backfield, but I don't think we're going to see any wide receivers line up as a running back in this game. And I know we talked to Jalil Farouk about that. He said he liked it because he did that a lot in high school and things like that, but that's not something you want to see on the college level. And they had to go through that until Gavin Sawchuk got his rhythm down, and that fourth quarter is what they're going to have to build on, that what they did in that fourth quarter. And having Gavin Sawchuk in there, having Marcus Major in there, I think Marcus Major's a little bit better than he was last week, and Tawee Walker back as well. You feel a little bit better about the run game. Now, OU hasn't been the best at running the football, but that helps a lot. It helps a lot, and it can be a lot better, especially as that offensive line gets another week of playing together, playing with those same guys in there. So it should turn out pretty well. Let's see what happens, though.
Yeah, I'm also curious to see, if it is indeed cold and rainy, how much of an impact is that going to have on Oklahoma's downfield passing? We we didn't see as much downfield passing last week without Andrew Anthony. Obviously, a couple deep shots to Nick Anderson that he really capitalized on, but they're just wasn't the same kind of deep shots that we would see normally from this offense. And if it's raining, if it's a little harder to uncork some of those deep passes, how is Oklahoma going to adjust? Are we going to see more Drake Stoops kind of in that short to intermediate game? How are they going to get Jalil Farouk more involved? What's Nick Anderson's role going to look like without that kind of deep shot down the field? And just how does Jeff Levy and how does Dylan Gabriel kind of adapt to kind of an adverse situation for them in terms of passing the ball if it is indeed going to be raining during this game?
100%. As far as the running backs go, and I'm looking at Sawchuk. He obviously had the nice finish, the 30-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter on Saturday against UCF. Feels like there's an opening here for maybe him to kind of assert himself as maybe the number one guy. And obviously, Tolly Walker, like I said, will be back. It feels like Brent Venables, and you guys can speak on it too if you'd like. It feels like he's exhausted with the running back situation. He's tired of answering questions about it. He's tired of them not being able to run the ball that effectively. Listen to him on his coach's show or whatever it may be. I think Oklahoma is, and he said as much a few weeks ago, ready for a guy to step up and be the guy and to take the job and run with it. I think Sawchuk has the best chance to do that. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. I'm keeping a close eye on him. I feel like the opportunity is there slightly for him to break through it if he can just make the most of his opportunities. I think Saturday may present that, against a rushing defense that's bad. Like we just said, 93rd in the country in rushing defense. You got to be able to run the ball in this game. If it's going to be cold and wet and you're playing a bad team on rush defense specifically, you got to be able to run the ball. You just have to. So going to be fun to, interesting to see if Sawchuk can slide into that role. But
yeah, I think, as long as Javonte Barnes is still kind of hindered by that,
Barnes is still, right.
I think Gavin Sawchuk is their best bet at a explosive run game. And, they've really lacked that this year. They've been able to get, 4 or 5 yards at a time when they've needed to for the most part, but they haven't had those big runs. They have only 3 runs this season of 30 or more yards. And one of those was Gavin Sawchuk's touchdown last weekend. Tolly Walker had one earlier in the season. I can't recall off the top of my head where that third one came from, but they're just lacking in those explosive run plays. And I think Gavin Sawchuk is the guy of those 3 that you have healthy who's most likely to get you those. So we'll see where his confidence is at, where his health is at. He seems like he's coming off that hamstring injury pretty well. Seemed like he was, he tried not to get down on himself in that first quarter against UCF because, he had a couple of mistakes, coming out there on the first few snaps. Yeah. And what was his first start? He had that mishandled snap on a Wildcat play. He dropped a 3rd down pass in the flat that, probably would have converted a first down because of the way they had the blocking set up downfield. But, he kind of kept his head right, got encouraged by his teammates on the field. Didn't really get many touches until the 3rd quarter again. But then we saw him in that 4th quarter finish really strong. We'll see how that carries over this week.
I mean, I must be the outlier here because I've always liked Tolly Walker since we saw him in the first game. I just like what he's done out there, and seems to be the most consistent back that they have. Now, who knows where that puts him on the totem pole, his in-house suspension. I mean, how he's going to get a chance to play and things like that. Maybe that changes a lot of it. But I think if you're an OU fan, you don't really care which guy it is. You just want to see a good run game go on and really help out Dylan Gabriel and that OU offense.
Yeah, I think even if they, do turn to Gavin Sawchuk some more and kind of get him going just because he's a little bit more dynamic as a playmaker, I think there is a role for Tolly Walker and Marcus Major in certain situations. But like James said, I like what I've seen from Tolly Walker at times this season. He runs with purpose. He falls forward. You don't really see him get tackled behind the line of scrimmage often. And you need that in certain situations. But again, like I said, I just think of those options, I think Gavin Sawchuk is the guy that's most likely to bring some dynamite to that offense in the run game.
It's hard not to just keep, we've referenced it all season, just to keep thinking of the Cheez-It Bowl, where that was his first chance to really get some running against a really good Florida State team that had NFL guys on their D line, and they run all over the place. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, this duo, Barnes and Sawchuk, going into next year is going to be fantastic to watch, and just hasn't worked out that way because of injuries and just general play. Just kind of overall, it hasn't been what we thought it would be, to say the least. But yeah, to wrap up offense, going to be interesting. The weather is obviously a major factor. How they're going to get down the field is more Nick Anderson, Farouk, things like that. And I'm also just curious the aggression level inside the 30 or so, coming off of a weekend where you just missed 2 field goals and the weather could be crappy. Just is Oklahoma maybe a little more inclined to roll the dice on 4th down than trust Schmidt right now, assuming he is still the guy, which it sounds like he is. I mean, based off what Brent Venables has said, there's not really a whole lot of reason to deceive about who your starting kicker is. How does that influence Oklahoma's play calling, specifically when they get into, the 30 inside the red zone, whatever? That's going to be interesting to see as well for me. But, yeah, anything else on offense that you guys were looking for? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, just with the run game, the offensive line is going to need to be a little bit more consistent. Curious to see how it shakes out at right guard this week.
Yeah.
I don't expect McCabe Matoyer to be back out there again this week, but last week it was a pretty even split between Savion Byrd and Troy Everett. So curious to see how that goes. I mean, not Troy Everett, Caleb Schaefer. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty even split there at right guard between those two. Caden Green played every snap at left guard. So, if they can lock down that offensive line and get these guys, kind of rolling on the same page in the run game, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Defensively for Oklahoma in this game, tough test, obviously. Kansas has got guys. They're an offensive team. That's kind of been the book on them. Going all the way back to Big 12 Media Days, we're talking to, Michael Swaim and every 24/7, about Kansas, what they have to bring to the table. And it was kind of, they're going to be great on offense. I don't know about that defense, though. And that was with Jalen Daniels. But even with Jason Bean, they are dynamic. They can really run the ball. 12th in the country in rushing coming into this weekend. Obviously, UCF was 3rd in the country in rushing. We documented that on Monday. Couldn't run the ball. Obviously, out of a couple of big runs, they couldn't really do much of anything. So Oklahoma is going to have confidence going in that they just did it. They just shut down a good rushing offense. Very similar. It's been a big topic all week, talking to players post-practice, whatever. Kansas are very similar in terms of the deception and things like that. So coming off a game where you had success against UCF, there's reason to be confident going into this. They're only 65th in passing, but we know they are capable of making plays with Jason Bean, 21st in scoring. This Kansas team can move the ball. They have a good offense. Defensively, where are your concern points going into this game? What's the area that you feel like if Kansas is going to put up a lot of points and move the ball, this is going to be how they do it and where Oklahoma's going to struggle?
OU's been so good everywhere. I mean, it's really hard to see, but I think what we've seen is some of those passes over the middle of the field kind of hurt them a little bit here and there when they get those big chunk plays. That's the area of concern, I guess, if you had to pick one. That's where I would say, because that's where a lot of teams seem to beat them. And the players have known that people are watching that film and trying to figure that out and trying to figure out how to beat them. So I think Deshaun McCullough is the one that said that they're going to reference what they saw against UCF and try to use it against us. So I think they just got to find a way to stop that now. They know that people are going to go there, figure out what the issue is and try to stop it. Now, we talked about UCF and their trick plays. Kansas is another team that does a lot of those as well. If it is a lot of bad weather, I think that'll hurt their trick play rotation or however they do that as well, because it's really hard to run trick plays by itself. But if it's in the rain and it's cold and things like that, that could really change some things. So just seeing where this defense is going to be at, I think over the middle of the field, to answer your question, is where it is right now.
Yeah, I think the term of the week around this Oklahoma team has been eye crimes.
Yeah,
we've heard that from a lot of players. It's just remaining disciplined, especially when you're facing an offense that's a little bit more deceptive, runs a lot of eye candy, a lot of pre-snap motion, things like that to try to get you off your keys. That's where we saw UCF kind of hurt Oklahoma last week. It happened on that 50-something yard run, happened on that 86-yard touchdown pass. It's the reason why UCF was in that game. Oklahoma knows that it's going to face a similar sort of offense, and it just needs to be more disciplined. But yeah, I mean, they want to cut back on those eye crimes. They don't want to be repeat offenders this week because, like Brent Venables said, the coaching staff has a stack of cards that's just like plays that they didn't run well and plays that opponents kind of took advantage of against them, because they know, college football is a copycat game. All the teams that are scouting them are looking back at the plays where, hey, maybe they missed a step here, maybe they didn't have their keys right here. Let's see how we can kind of adapt this play and kind of leverage that toward, a big play for ourselves. They're repping those every week, as like Brent Venables said, it's a professional courtesy, so to speak. And, they're going to be prepared to, just, again, be more disciplined and, not make those same mistakes again and again. Because, like we said, this defense has been so improved this season. They've given up their share of chunk plays here and there, but for the most part, they've been playing so fundamentally sound. And if they can just keep it together for a whole, 60 minutes against another explosive offense. I mean, Kansas is averaging 7.2 yards per play this season, which is 7th in the country. I mean, it's an offense that moves the ball.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to not, give up those big plays like Kansas get over the top or, break off any of those big runs.
Yeah, it feels like to me, if you bottle up Devin Neal in that Kansas running game pretty well, you're going to be fine. And Oklahoma, like we were just saying, has done very well in that area this season. That D tackle room in particular has just gotten better and better and better literally every week. It feels like every single week my opinion of them is more and more improved. And so, that's going to be a big key to me. Obviously, you got to eliminate the coverage bust. That's been a little bit of a problem. If you want to kind of like to James' point, I mean, you saw UCF break an 86-yard touchdown run or pass right before halftime. They've had a few of those kind of just lapses, but for the most part, it's been really hard to just drive your way down the field against Oklahoma this year. And they've been so good, obviously, in the red zone. Tom detailed that today on those goal-to-go situations on 24/7 on Oklahoma.247sports.com. You can't move the ball against Oklahoma. Completely. Just not. What's the stat? Drop the stat. We want it. Everybody wants it.
Through 7 games, Oklahoma has had 18 goal-to-go plays defensively against them. They've allowed just 7 yards total on those 18 plays. I think that's like 0.43 yards per play. They've given up 2 touchdowns in those situations. Both those came after a defensive penalty. Last week, Jaron Kanik had that unsportsmanlike conduct that after a 3rd and goal stop gave UCF a fresh set of downs. They scored on the next play. SMU, week 2, Peyton Bowen, I think, got called for pass interference, set up 1st and 2, and they scored on the next play. But other than that, it's really been 6 possessions of goal-to-go situations for Oklahoma's defense. They've given up the 2 touchdowns after penalties. They've held opponents to field goal 3 times. And, of course, they had that goal line stand against Texas. So They've just been really good with their backs against the wall this season. And it's kind of just like, it's a mentality. Like Ted Roof said after the Texas game, it's about lining up and whipping the guy in front of you and just being more physical. And each time they've gotten these stops, even though they gave up the touchdown last week, but each time they've gotten these stops, it just seems like their confidence gets higher and higher and higher that they can do this again. And I think it was Ethan Downs on Monday said, it's a championship defense type of mentality when you can do that.
Yeah, and Josh, I'm glad you brought up Devin Neal, Kansas running back, because I asked Coach Venables about this. Like, you've already faced good guys like R.J. Harvey and Jonathan Brooks. I mean, how are you preparing for Neal in this week? And he was pretty much like, well, we don't really necessarily care which running back is in the backfield. As long as we handle all of our assignments, we'll be just fine because we got good players too. And that's pretty much the sentiment for it. It's not necessarily they're preparing for a certain back out there. It's just staying in your scheme, staying in your assignment, and they'll do a good job. And Oklahoma has done a very good job of that this year so far.
Yeah, and Josh, I want to circle back real quick on what you were just talking about, the defensive tackles. I had a story up on the site this morning on Dejon Terry, who started his career at Kansas, played 2 years there. But a stat I stumbled across when I was writing that story, he has been Oklahoma's best run defender among the defensive linemen this season. And among Big 12 interior defensive linemen, only 2 other guys are more effective than him. Guy at West Virginia and Tavondre Sweat at Texas. And I mean, Tavondre Sweat, that's a first-round guy. I've just been really impressed with Dejon Terry. And like you said, that whole group of defensive tackles this season, just the depth and how well they've been able to kind of control the point of attack against opponents this season. It's been really impressive.
Yeah, Terry and then Isaiah Coe, who was good again on Saturday. I mean, Isaiah Coe, you just can't move that guy. He's just a refrigerator. He's huge, and teams just don't know what to do with him. Had a tackle for loss, I believe, against UCF. that group has just been, just gotten better and better.
Jacob Lacey, Jonah
Yeah.
Lulu.
Yes. Lacey's gotten in there. You're right. Laulu. I mean, that whole
Jordan
group.
Kelly. I mean, all of them. They've been really good this season. That it just speaks to the improved depth across that defensive line.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And you pair that with the edges. Ethan Downs playing the best football of his life. Trace Ford has come along.
Rondell Bothroyd.
Yeah, Rondell Bothroyd. It's in a good place. It's in a good place right now. You mentioned Terry, bit of a homecoming for him, going back to where he played before. Same for Jaren Kanak. Obviously, he's from Kansas. Kansas Player of the Year. Just dominated Kansas high school football. Basically did everything when his time there. Got him obviously committed to Clemson and flipped over to Oklahoma. Brent Venables took the job. He mentioned, he's going to be a captain this week. He's going to have a lot of family there. Feels like it's just one of those situations just right for him to make a big play. And he's been really good this year too. Jaren Kanak consistently. Obviously, Danny Stutzman has been just the guy, that reliable force. You get to the end of the game, I look at the box score they hand out after game, and he's the leading tackler every week, basically, it feels like. But always up there in that top 3 or 4 is Jaren Kanak as well. He's had a very nice season, and feels like he's probably primed up to make something happen in this game as well. And also just these games where, they're going to need to make tackles in open space, and that kind of falls back on the linebackers and Kanak. So that linebacker group, a tough test for them with those two. And McCullough can loop him in there as well.
Yeah, with the with Kanak, like you said, with it being his homecoming, and I think to a certain extent he's going to want to kind of redeem himself for that taunting penalty against UCLA.
He's not happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, like he came over to the sideline and told his team and apologized for being quote unquote selfish, were his words. I mean, I think he feels like that touchdown that they allowed after that is on him because they had them dead to rights there on the goal line. Mm-hmm. So I think, like you said, it's just a recipe for, hey, keep an eye on him for a possible breakout game. But, the linebackers, the defensive line, I mean, Oklahoma's been playing so good defensively. I think they're tops in the nation in tackles for loss this season. They've just been living in opponents' backfields and, even though the sacks haven't always been there, they've gotten a little bit better in recent weeks. I think they've got 10 over the last 3 games. That pass rush is still developing, still coming along better. But when teams have, handed the ball off or tried to run, screen passes behind the line of scrimmage or something like that, they've been really good at just hounding the ball and not letting them, get far.
For sure. So this game, Jaren Kanak, like we said, a bit of a homecoming for him. Dejon Terry comes back. Brent Venables, obviously, from Kansas as well. Last time getting up there, going to be kind of interesting. Should be a raucous crowd, like we said. Kind of final thoughts on this one for Oklahoma and Kansas weekend. Pick the game. If you're Collin, if you guys want to know, obviously people listen to the show know. He had 35-21 Oklahoma, and so he's got Oklahoma covering the number. Little standings update, if you're curious. Against the spread, we all took losses last week, so we all had Oklahoma covering, and they did not. So James and I are 6-1. Tom and Collin are 5-2 against the spread. We're all 6-1 straight up. We all know what the one is. Thoughts on this game and how you actually see it playing out? Final score predictions: Oklahoma, Kansas on Saturday.
James, you want to go first?
I like what Collin said. I was going to say this too. 35-17. I'll go just a few points below, just to be a little bit different. I like that score there. I think Oklahoma keeps up their streak of scoring 34 or more points against Kansas because the offense has been that good this season. And Kansas just a little bit down on defense, so we'll see what happens there. But I like that score there, and I think OU can cover this week as well, like they've done many, many times this year.
You want me to go, Tom?
I can go. I was still trying to figure out what my score was going to be. But I think I'm going to go 31-13 on this one. I think what we saw last week against a really good UCF rushing attack, I think that's going to carry over this week. I don't expect this one to be as high scoring because of the weather. If it does, rain and is as wet and sloppy as we kind of expect it to be. I think there's going to be a little bit lower scoring, but I think Oklahoma's going to put up enough to kind of keep Kansas at a distance. And again, I just think without Jalen Daniels, this Kansas offense just isn't, as big of a threat against this Oklahoma defense with the way they're playing.
So you've got OU scoring 31 points 2 times in a row. Oh, nice.
I didn't even realize I had that last week.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in the same ballpark in terms of margin of victory. I am going to still pick the game to be higher scoring than you guys. I got 42-27.
Oh, wow.
Oklahoma. I think Kansas has got guys. I think they'll move the ball. I think they'll get some points up. Not that 27 is some big number. You see, I scored 29. You know what I mean? I think Oklahoma's gonna be okay. I'm trying to not let the weather influence my score too much because who knows? You get too in your head with like, oh, it's gonna be weather, it's gonna be rainy, and then you let it influence you. So I'm gonna say Oklahoma wins at 42-27. I think Oklahoma will throw the ball around all right, even with the weather. I think they'll run it a little better. I don't see any field goals for Oklahoma in this game. I think that with the way the weather is, I can so perfectly envision they go for one early and he misses it, and then they're just like, okay, forget that. We're not kicking the rest of this game. I kind of could see that happening. So I'm going to go 42-27. Oklahoma wins. They cover. We all have Oklahoma covering, and I'm the only one who has the over. The over-under is at 65, so you guys were all very comfortably under. I'm going over by a few. So there you have it. Should be a fun game. Looking forward to it. I gotta get prepped up. I already ordered like some rain gear. It's gonna be a whole thing. It's gonna be a whole thing. But you guys are cushy in the press box. Think of me. Think of me.
It's all right. Warmers.
Yes, it's. I mean, the cold games are tough enough. I'm not great with cold weather. I get through it, but it's a bit of a challenge. But the rain, don't throw rain into the mix too. We don't need that. That's too much. It's too much. So we'll see what happens this weekend. Maybe the rain will hold off. We can hold. We can hope. We can hope. Oklahoma, Kansas, 11 a.m. on Saturday. Big new kickoff will be there, like we said. It's not a Gus and Joel, unfortunately. They're doing the game later. It's going to be Benetti and Heward on Saturday morning on Fox. Tune into the game. Hang out in the live thread on Oklahoma.247sports.com, the game thread with Tom and James reacting, kind of talking about the game as it unfolds. VIP subscribe to that. And Collin, absolutely. CK from home. And going to be an interesting game. Keep up with us all throughout the weekend, obviously. We'll all be up there in Lawrence. And we'll see what can go down this weekend, Oklahoma and Kansas. Subscribe, Oklahoma247sports.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well for full post-game reaction from us, Brent Venables, Dylan Gabriel, coordinators, players, the whole bit. And we'll have a full reaction on Sunday and next week as well. On Monday, the next episode of the podcast, our full game breakdown for Oklahoma and Kansas. I think that's it, gentlemen. I'll see you guys in Topeka on I guess I won't see you until Saturday morning, unless you guys are just pulling a late night on Friday. I'll see you guys Saturday morning in Topeka, Kansas. That's it for us. For Tom Green, James C. Jackson, Collin Kennedy earlier, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys Monday, the next edition of the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.